everyone. It is so good to see you this morning. Welcome to Westside UU Church, where you are going to learn this new phrasing, where love unites, caring connects, and community thrives. I'm Reverend Carol Badeau. I'm privileged to serve here as minister. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I am thrilled to see you all this morning. If you are here in person, it's great to have you in the room with us. And if you are here virtually with us, whether on a Sunday morning right now or at some point in the future, we're glad you could connect with us. This is a place where we come together to be inspired, to be healed, to be educated, to learn about ourselves and one another, and to hopefully help to build the world that we dream of. So there are a number of announcements that are available for those of you who have a printed order of service, and for those of you virtually with us, those should have been scrolling on your screen so you could see them. Some of you know we had our auction last week. That was wonderful. Thank you to all of those who participated in making that happen. Today, we're going to be talking about our stories, and we're going to get to hear Chris Edkins tell a little bit about his story. So, before we do anything else, we are going to play a little music for you. Chris and I are going to play our flutes for you. So, we invite you to just settle in and get comfortable in your seats so that you can really enjoy the stories and the sounds that we're going to share today. Oh, sorry, hold on, the flute's not working right. Flute's broken.
I'm having the same problem.
Your turn with the bowl.
Oh yes. I'm going to ring a Tibetan singing bowl today to bring us into this sacred space. You settle into your seats, listen to the sound of the bowl, leave behind you the worries of the week, and come into this spiritual sacred space.
So today we're talking about stories. And stories are something that we forget how much a part of our lives stories are. We think that stories are something we read in books or hear in movies, but actually stories are literally the fabric of everything we do. We tell stories about our neighbors, we tell stories about our families, we tell stories about ourselves. So I'm going to ask Chris to light our chalice. These words come from Patrick Rothfuss from The Name of the Wind. It's like he says, everyone tells a story about themselves inside their own head. Always, all the time. That story makes you what you are. We build ourselves out of that story. The stories we tell make a difference. The stories we tell about things that happen in the world, the stories we tell about what we believe about ourselves and others. Every story we tell, even if it's just a sentence or two, makes a difference. So our community candles today that Chris has lit, we've decided to tell stories a slightly different way here. We were lighting one candle for the things that are struggling, that are giving us struggles or pain or suffering in the world, and we decided to add a second candle for good news. So we're telling two different kinds of stories now. We are lighting a candle, and this week, the struggle in the world that we're lifting up is the recent attacks that the US and the UK have carried out, airstrikes on the Houthi targets in Yemen, for all the people that are suffering in every possible angle of that situation. We just hold that up as a struggle and a suffering in the world. We have two pieces of good news to celebrate today, two interesting stories. One is a more global story that I want to encourage you to check out if you have not yet done so, which is, how many of you are familiar with the Webb Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope? Okay, the pictures from this thing are so cool. They put us in so much context. So I was looking this morning at Good News. The Webb telescope has captured mind-expanding portraits of 19 spiral galaxies, like our own spiral galaxy, each of them containing millions of stars. Now just think about that for a minute. It's kind of mind-bending. So that's a global piece of good news we can keep our attention on. On a more personal piece of good news, we are super happy to have Helen, Rose, and Henry back with us. Yay! Welcome back to Helen and Henry. It's great to have you here. So we are going to do a little exercise today. We tell stories in lots of different ways. We tell stories with words. We tell stories with our bodies. We tell stories with our body language, right? I mean, what's the different story if I'm standing like this versus if I'm standing like this? And we tell story with sound. So the flutes make sounds, the bowl makes sounds, and we are going to sing. We are going to sing. So I'm going to invite whatever brave choir members want to come up and help lead this. You can be brave. Come on. Come on, be brave. Chris is going to help us. We're going to be brave. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to sing meditation and breathing. So there's two parts. One part goes, when I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. That's one part. Y'all on that side of the room are singing that. Over here you're singing, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. Okay, now Chris, you want to help these guys? Let's make it 3 and 3. Okay? So we're going to start over here. They're going to start, and then I'm going to bring you all in, okay? Because sometimes when we're writing the story of our lives, we're doing it kind of on the spur of the moment. We get put in a situation where we're like, okay, I'll try it. All right, so over here, are you ready? Breathe in, breathe out. Just keep doing that. Breathe in, breathe out. Keep going. Breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. A little faster over here. When I breathe in I breathe out. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. One more time. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. Good job. Give yourselves a hand. Sometimes when we are creating or co-creating the stories of our lives, we have a little bit of guidance, we have a little bit of direction, we kind of know what we're doing, we might feel a little confident, we might not, we might have to be kind of improvisational, and frequently we are creating the story of our life with other people who we can't necessarily predict how on tune they're going to be. We can't necessarily predict how good their rhythm is. We can't necessarily predict how much they want to sing with us. They may be really enthusiastic about singing with us and really not have great rhythm. And we got to improvise around that. They might say, I don't like singing. Singing is stupid. I don't want to sing. Don't make me sing. And we're like, but I'm going to sing anyway. All kinds of things can happen as we're creating the stories of our lives. But we actually are scripting our lives individually and collectively every minute of every day. How many of you have heard a voice in your head say, "You're such a fill in the blank"? At least once. You're such a worrier. You're such a doofus. You're so good at that. Right? That is writing a story about your own life. And we build those narratives out of experiences. And we make choices about those experiences. So some of you attended the auction last week, and you got to hear some of the little interesting facts that were included in the Getting to Know You matching game. Everybody remembering this? I'm pulling up my copy of the Getting to Know You game list, because we learned some very interesting things about some people in our congregation at the auction. That's part of their stories that we didn't know. For example, I did not know before last week that Sandra Thomas had been in an elevator with Elvis. like, I want to hear that story, right? We also learned that Barry Schumpert had won a beauty pageant. At summer camp, right? I want to hear the story of that, okay? We also learned things about, one person, I don't remember who this was on the Greek island of Hydra and got to sit at the table with Leonard Cohen. Okay, I want to hear that story. That's a fascinating story, right? Someone has been snorkeling with sea turtles and manatees and swimming with dolphins, right? I mean, I could go on. There are so many things that we learned just in that little one sentence about a person game last week at the auction that I want to hear the whole story, right? We are an interesting bunch of people. But the truth is that if you talk to any person long enough, any person, you will discover that they are an interesting person. That they have a fascinating story that's full of twists and turns and unexpected things that they didn't predict. I have never, ever met someone whose actual story was dull or boring. It's not possible. We simply just don't take the time to listen to each other's stories. We usually stick to the very superficial, mundane, day-to-day stuff. And that's a debt to all of us. We're all losing something when we don't stick around long enough to ask about the juicy pieces, or when we're afraid to share the juicy pieces. But doing that is really important for a couple of reasons. First, when we actually listen to someone's whole story, we can understand their perspectives, their motivations, and their decisions more thoroughly. This is especially important with people we don't understand, don't know, or maybe don't like very much. This can help us, listening to their story can help us understand how to work with them in times of conflict or struggle. Or it can help us understand that we're really more different than we thought, and that maybe we need to change our relationships. As we heard from Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh last week, the key to being loving to ourselves and to others is understanding. And understanding can only come when we really explore what's really happening for another person. So hearing the stories of another person leads to understanding, which leads to better relationship boundaries and connection. That's true personally, but it's also true at the communal level and at the global level. Listening to others' stories also can make us feel really good. Like it tells us something about inspiration. It tells us something about hope. It tells us something about surprises. It gives us more common ground, right? I may think I don't have anything in common with you, but then you tell me that one weird story about that one weird person you met in that one weird situation, and suddenly maybe we have something in common, right? The other thing it does is when we really listen to the full story of another person, is we start to see them as a full human being. So it's so easy to think we know someone from our encounters that are short and superficial and always the same. We make assumptions. One of the most common things I hear in my office with the door closed when people come to visit me, to talk to me about really deep stuff, is they say, I know nobody else has this problem. Literally every person says that during the first conversation they have. I know I'm the only person who's dealing with this. And I always say, nope, not true, not true, right? So we come in a room like this and we look around, or if you're there virtually, you look around at the people in your work or in your family and you think, well, I kind of get them. I know what they're going through. We don't necessarily. We really have to listen to the stories. And that allows us all to be more human. So let's ask ourselves this question. In a moment, Chris is going to share his story, which is a brave thing to do, right? How many of us are afraid to tell our story? And how many of us are not so sure we really want to hear the story of another person? It complicates things. It complicates things. That level of truth-telling and truth-hearing makes it darn near impossible to just say, you're like me, you're not like me. You're good, you're bad. Yes, no. When we actually tell full stories and listen to full stories, we break down simplistic, easy descriptions and boxes. That's a complicated thing, it's a challenging thing, it's a vulnerable thing, but it's worth doing. It's good for, you could call it the soul, you could call it the psyche, however you want to name that thing. But when we listen to each other's stories, and when our stories are heard, something deep inside us knows that we matter. We connect deeply, and we go beyond acquaintance to real connection. And the truth is that deep down, no matter how defensive or protected we are, that's something that is an absolute human need. It is an absolute human need to connect. So we're going to start a new series here at Westside called What's Your Story? And we're going to hear some of those stories. People are going to be sharing stories that might be inspirational or humorous or shocking. They might be stories of changing course or changing minds, of making a difference in the world in very small ways or making a difference in the world in very big ways, but they all matter. And we're starting today with Chris. Chris is going to share some of his story.
Thank you, Reverend Carol. Let's start at the beginning, right? In the beginning, the universe was created. This has made a lot of people very angry and has generally been considered to be a bad idea. And I'll tell you where that quote comes from in a minute, because it's part of my story. And when you were talking about other people's stories, all kinds of things were kind of firing off on my head. I thought, I wonder how long these guys have got, you know. I mean, I have to be somewhere else at 2, so we have to be out of here by then, but I'll try and keep it short. But you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from around here. I was born in Birmingham in England. And I didn't come to the United States till the mid-1990s, and by then I was too old to lose my English accent. I was thinking when I was writing this, I've heard a lot of people talk about their stories of their spiritual journeys and how they came to the UU Church, and it normally falls into a couple of different categories. There's people who grew up as UUs, which they're kind of rare, right? They're few and far between. And then there's people who maybe were in a different denomination and they found that they were at odds with that because of the way their beliefs had developed as they'd grown to adulthood, and they'd left there, maybe been on church for a while before they'd found the UU Church and found a home where they could actually express their beliefs. And that's not really my story. I was raised in an atheistic household. We never set foot in church when I was a child. In fact, I never went to church, never set foot in a church until I was in my early 20s. The family went for what we call in the UK, we call it hatching, matching and dispatching, which is christenings, weddings and funerals. So that's the only reason our families ever went to church. And in fact, when I told my sister that I was regularly attending a church here in America, she thought that maybe I'd gone insane. So there you go. That is the background of my upbringing. But for myself, I had a curiosity about all things religious and spiritual from the earliest age, so much so that when the Jehovah's Witnesses came knocking on the door, I would invite them in to talk to them. And, you know, we did a couple of Bible studies before they kind of got a little bit frustrated with me for not asking questions, because I was kind of, I've heard these stories in school, you know. I have my own ideas about these, but let's get to the interesting bits, you know, and then I'll have some questions about that. And so they kind of gave up on me. But yes, I ought to say that as well, that in the UK, I don't know if you know this, but Britain has an official state religion. It's the Church of England. Which means that we have religious assembly in school, we sing hymns and have prayer, and I had no objection to that. A lot of the hymns that we used to sing are in the UU hymnal, and I still enjoy singing them. And the song "To Be a Pilgrim" was used at my father's humanist funeral service when he passed away in 2007, so that is close to my heart. So that is kind of where I started out, having kind of a curiosity and an intuitive idea that maybe there was something more, but that was not reflected back in my family of birth. So I kind of went on, I decided at an early age that I was an atheist in terms of it may not be possible to know what the truth is about the existence of God. And that was kind of my default position for many years, and was still my default position when I joined the UU Church back in 2024. I wanted to mention this because I started off with that quote. When I was a teenager, this will date me as to how old I was. The original radio series of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was broadcast on BBC Radio 4. I recorded it and learned all 6 original episodes by heart with all the dialogue, and used to regularly quote it to people, and was quite annoying, you know, because nobody wants to hear you quoting stuff at them incessantly. So the quote that I used at the beginning was a Douglas Adams quote from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And I also met Douglas Adams at a book signing. I had my copy of the first book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the book version that he wrote. I waited in line to get that signed. which I then subsequently loaned that book to somebody, and it never came back to me, so I lost it. But Douglas Adams was chain smoking throughout the whole of the book signing. It just goes to show, do not meet your heroes because they may have feet of clay. But in my 20s, I was very interested in Buddhism, and I read a lot of Buddhist philosophy and practiced meditation. And I found that to be a very useful and practical spiritual path. But the problem with it for me is that I'm incredibly lazy and impatient, and the idea of sitting in meditation for possibly many years before I could attain what I was looking for, which was to become some kind of wonderful super being, it was like it was too much for me. So I was interested in the philosophy, but I couldn't really commit to the practice, you know. So that was another part of my spiritual path. So I think that was kind of, things were fairly settled for me for a long, long time with those two things, that I identified as an atheist. I was interested in Buddhism, but I wasn't really practicing it. And when I moved to Knoxville in 2003, moved here with my job to work at the University of Tennessee at the College of Veterinary Medicine, it seemed like everything had fallen into place with me. It was a great time in my life. I'd just got my green card, so, you know, I was legally able to stay here in the United States. I loved my job at the vet school, and I loved Knoxville. Knoxville is such a great place, you know. The people are friendly here. You can go up to any stranger and talk to them, like at the checkout in the supermarket, or, you know, people you just bump into in a restaurant. It's perfectly okay. It's acceptable to strike up a conversation with a stranger. And it wasn't like that everywhere where I went into in the United States. I'm kind of like that, you know. In the UK, I used to take the bus, and, you know, I met people on the bus that I became friendly with, and we had conversations with. Somebody on the bus recommended a driving instructor to me, who I eventually passed my driving test with. So, you know, I love talking to strangers. But when I was in Dallas, I had one or two unpleasant experiences of trying to talk to strangers and them assuming that I was a serial killer or a sexual predator, or, you know, various things, you know, that where, in my opinion, I was just kind of trying to be friendly. So I was really pleased when I came to Knoxville and I found that it was such an open place where you could talk to anybody. So that was a big part of it. And when I would drive from where we lived on the Pellissippi Parkway to go into work, especially in the fall, you have this marvelous thing where the mist forms on the river and arches up over the road bridges, and you feel like you're driving through like a golden archway. You know, it's so gorgeous here at all the different times of the year. I just so much love East Tennessee. And I kind of felt my life was complete, and I was looking for a way to have a way to express that and do some kind of service to kind of give back for all the wonderful things that I had. And that was how I found the UU Church online. And I attended for the very first time on New Year's Day 2024, when Bill Calhoun...
2024 is now.
2024? 2004. Yeah. Yeah, 2020.
Time
Yeah,
passes.
That was true. Yeah, that did pass. Yeah. And it's funny because I've only just stopped writing 2023 when I write the date. So, you know, I don't know. 2024 is on my mind. So 2004, I first came to the church then, and when Bill was doing his Janus service. So I was very quickly embraced by the congregation. At that time, we had a piano player who was another English lady, Ruth Jennings, and you know, we had a great deal in common. She loved to play Jerusalem, which we sang in school. It's a hymn, you know. And did those feet in ancient times? That one, if you've ever heard it. No? Okay, so she used to play it. My headmaster in my school used to really bang that out on the piano, and we all used to sing it, so we kind of bonded over that. So I was very quickly welcomed into this community. And at that time, Sue Draper, who is now departed from us, was the chair of the worship committee, and, I got drafted onto the worship committee. And the chairship was passed on to me like a hot potato. And
How many decades ago was that?
that was probably, they didn't used to let people take committee positions in the first year in those days. So it was 19 years ago.
So you've been the worship committee chair for 19 years.
Yeah. So there you go. So, so obviously I feel at home here. So we're good. Yeah, I'm just checking the time because I don't want to run over time or bore you. But so this brings me to like the difficult part of my story. It's not particularly difficult for me, but I'll give a trigger warning because it involves addiction and substance abuse. I haven't mentioned this, but from the very earliest age, when I had my first drink of alcohol, I thought that was a marvelous thing. And I knew when I started drinking that it would play a very big part in my life. And I was always interested in alcohol and the making of it and different cocktails. And I made my own wine and beer. And for many years, that was not too much of a problem. But they say that alcoholism is a progressive disease. As you carry on practicing it and your body gets older, it becomes more of a problem, and it did become a problem for me. And probably it's gradual as it's kind of crept up on me. It started to cause problems in my marriage and almost caused me to be divorced from my wife because of, I was drinking so much. Especially, like in the evenings I would drink at home and get to the point where I was completely incoherent, and that was a very disturbing thing, for somebody else to experience. And because of the problems I had with my marriage, we were selling our house at the time, and we were thinking we may go our separate ways, sell the house and split the money and go our separate ways. And because of the support I had in this church, my wife and myself met with Reverend Carol and one of my wife's friends. We decided not to do that, but take more of a wait-and-see attitude. And after that, I started attending recovery meetings and became a sober alcoholic and started working my program. So I will tell you, I had such wonderful support from this organization. Very shortly after I decided that I was an alcoholic and I needed to stay sober, I talked to people in the church about it openly, and Mary Isaacs and David Bechtel gave me a place to stay above their garage for a month after I was separated, and then I moved in with Sue Draper and lived in her spare room for over a year before I was reunited with my wife. So I had such wonderful support. But I'll tell you that this process and the process of coming to sobriety has become my primary form of spirituality today. The path, 12-step path of recovery, is a spiritual path. It has teachings that tell you, that put forth theories of what addiction is all about, and it has teachings that tell you what the solutions to those predictions are, including having faith, practicing self-reflection and prayer, and coming to live life on life's terms and not expecting everything to go your way always and getting bent out of shape when it doesn't go your way. So, that is something I have learned which has been a great benefit to me, and I'm so grateful today to be able to stand up here and tell you that I'm a grateful recovering sober alcoholic. So thank you for your support over the years and for allowing me to be honest and open about that, and it not being a problem in this community. So how will I close things down? And I probably ought to close with another Douglas Adams quote, hadn't I, really? But I haven't got one prepared. So I'll say this, which I think is probably a kind of a you thing to say. You know, we are very open about us having different spiritual beliefs here, and everybody has their own spiritual path. We like to talk to other people about what our beliefs are and what our spiritual path is, and to see what the differences are and the similarities, and learn from each other in that respect. So I'll follow up with the second part of that quote that I quoted earlier about the beginning of the universe, that says, some people believe that the universe was made by some kind of creator, but the Jatrivarted people of Vogel 6 believe that the entire universe was sneezed out of the nose of a being they call the Great Green Arkle Seizure, and live in perpetual fear of a time they call the coming of the Great White Handkerchief. Thank you.
Awesome. So thank you, Chris. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions about that story, just to think about. First is, for those of you who didn't know Chris very well, I would ask you to think in your head, what story were you telling yourself about his story while he was telling it? Because we do. We're telling ourselves a story about somebody else's story while they're telling us their story. Right? I was thinking, as you were talking about Knoxville being a very friendly place, how many of you had a story about that in your head? Agreeing or disagreeing with that? Agreeing or disagreeing with that, right? Or how about traffic on Pellissippi? How many of you had a story in your head in response to that? I had a story that came up when you said, like a golden arch. I was thinking of another golden arch instantly, right? The stories are interweaving. And how many of us had a certain response to the story that changed when Chris started talking about struggles with addiction? How do we respond to other people's stories? So I'm going to tell you a short version of my story of Chris's story. One of my versions of Chris's story is, I come into the church. Chris is an amazing leader. He looks like things are going all right, and then he's human, and there are struggles. And I remember very clearly the day that during Joys and Concerns, right here on this chancel at a microphone, he said, I have realized I'm an alcoholic. And how many people in the room cried, and how when he stepped off the chancel, how many people stood up to hold him and hug him and say, I understand, I've struggled with that too. And the next piece of the story is how many people I have seen since that day be met by him as they confronted their own struggles with addiction. And how his story widened out into helping other people also going down that path, which is a powerful story. He didn't tell you that part of the story, but I've seen that part of the story too, that his story has touched many, many, many other people. And when someone comes to me and says, I'm struggling with this, I say, let me give you a phone number. Let me tell you someone that I know will talk to you about that. And he has never said no when I've said, can I give this person your contact? He said yes every time. So our stories are deep and powerful, and they matter. Now, we're always creating stories. If you look at your little order of service, it says justice and generosity opportunities. You know, you can think, oh, this is the part where she gives the speech about the money, which it kind of is, right? But it's also the part where we tell the story about why we matter in the world. We're not just here to serve ourselves. We're here because the story of this community is a story that touches other stories. It touches each of us here, and then, just like Chris's story, it spreads out into the world. So, financial support is absolutely wonderful and helpful. If you are here for the auction and you provided financial support, thank you. If you have a pledge that you make regularly to this congregation, thank you. If you are someone who is with us online or just visiting, or you just want to make a special contribution today, you can do that in the box at the back of the room or using the QR code. You can always go to our website. The way we share money is also a way we tell a story. You can think about the stories you tell yourself about your resources. They have a huge impact. We also tell stories by the ways we share our time and our energy. We have a story here at Westside that says we support particular programs all the time. We support some programs for people who are coming out of incarceration and trying to get sober. That's one of the generosity and justice things that we do all the time. We continue to support Family Promise in the ways that we are able. And we are currently looking for another ongoing project to support right now. So if you know the story of a group or an organization or an agency that could use our support, I would invite you to please let me know that. Email it to me, text me, talk to me in person, because we're looking for another program to support. And we also have ongoing work in Green Sanctuary, which is our environmental impact. So, Yetta, would you like to share a little bit of the story of what's going on with that program right now?
Sure, thank you. So as many of you know, we've started an initiative, a new Green Sanctuary Committee that everybody is welcome to join. We recently participated in a celebration. Charlie and I were both there online with the UUA's Green Sanctuary 2030 celebration. And we heard a lot of really cool ideas that other congregations were doing. And I'd like to share a few of those with you. In Olympia, Washington, this is under the heading of political and climate activism. And I don't know how many people here are interested in that, but that's one potential area that we can be involved in. In Olympia, they were protesting to have the Elwha Dam removed, and they participated in tree planting, which is something that Jerry Thornton is getting us involved in this spring, if you're interested. Let's see, where was this? There's another church where they were in the location of the Bear River Massacre that killed 600 Shoshone Indians, or Native Americans. White farmers at that time bought 500 acres and diverted the river to a farm. So now the Shoshone have purchased this land back, and the UU Church there is helping to remove invasive trees and plant native ones. The whole group together, not just this one church, planted over 8,000 trees. In other congregations, they're kind of digesting different bills that are being put forth and explaining them to the congregants so that they can respond to their legislators. And there's also an app called the Climate Action Now app that you can download and participate in that. But my favorite, I don't know why, just because it appeals to me, was one fellowship that got art involved in their Green Sanctuary effort. They created huge animal puppets, like big heads of different animals, and they participated in different climate activism and Earth Day parades with those. And this engaged the youth as well. There were a lot of congregations that focused on outdoor projects like stream cleanups. One stocked a food pantry to help with food security in the region, and taught their congregants how to garden, and also learning about animal tracking. Many of them have a focus on reducing their carbon footprints, which is something that we're very interested in as well. In Anianta, there was an interesting example where they established a nonprofit to promote natural burial, because apparently there's quite a carbon footprint to both, to being cremated. and it can release 135 pounds of CO2. And they're now looking for land for cemeteries. So many other congregations are providing online footprint calculators for their members and focusing on plant-based diets and trying to reduce the carbon footprint of the churches themselves. So there were a lot of interesting things going on, and I hope that stimulates some ideas for what we might be interested in doing here, and I'm glad to talk to anybody who's particularly interested in some of these ideas. Thank you.
Okay. So now we're going to do something that's a little bit storytelling. Y'all have to stand up if you would like to, if you are willing. If you're willing and able to stand. If you can and are interested in touching or holding hands with or being near someone, it is okay if you are not. Do not tell yourself the story that I cannot. I'll hold your sleeve. I'll hold your sleeve.
Yeah,
I heard, I just sneezed. I'll hold your, I don't got no stories about that. I'm not scared of you. So notice that there's stories. We tell stories constantly. Look around the room. Ask yourself, what story am I telling myself right now about being this close to this person, or being near these people, having to listen to Carol do this thing again? What story are you telling yourself? So when I was in seminary, I took a class that talked about what's called narrative ethics. And narrative ethics are based in the idea that we make our decisions based on the stories we tell ourselves. How many decisions do we make based on the story we tell ourselves about whether something is safe or not safe, good or bad, right or wrong? Right? The fact of the matter is, we are making decisions every moment about what we're going to do next. And listening to someone else's story might inspire us to a new action. It might educate us about a possibility or a risk. So the people around you are helping you build stories, which are helping you make decisions. Look at each other for a minute. May you be to one another, may we all be to one another people who help each other build stories of promise, of hope, of transformation, of joy, of love, of caring, and fun. And may we share those stories with our open hearts, our open minds, and with the willingness to get our hands involved in the process. Go in peace, go in passion, and go to share yourself with one another. May it be so.